shadow in the dark. Eimer lived a quiet life in an old, dark neighborhood in a small city. He had recently moved into an old house he inherited from his grandfather. The house was located on the outskirts of the city, away from the lights and hustle and bustle of daily life. The house was a bit run down, but it contained secrets he had yet to discover. From the first moment Eimer entered the house, he felt something strange. The air inside was heavy, and there was a strange smell that he couldn't explain. However, he decided to ignore his feelings and focus on tidying up the house. He did not know that this decision would lead him to worse. Days passed, and Eimer began to notice some strange things. At night, he would hear sounds coming from upstairs, as if someone was walking slowly on the wooden floors. At first, he thought the sound was just old sounds from the house being demolished, but as time passed, he began to suspect something bigger. One night, Eimer was working in his office when he felt something cold touch his neck. He turned quickly but saw no one. He continued his work, ignoring what happened, but deep down he felt that something was watching him. Then things started to escalate. Every morning, he found things had moved out of place. He would leave a book on the table, and when he came back, the book would be gone or put somewhere else. At first, he tried to convince himself it was just a coincidence, but the repetition made things seem more and more strange. He decided to seek the help of an expert in mysterious phenomena. He called Sammy, who was known for his abilities with haunted places. Sammy arrived home at night, with some special tools to detect paranormal phenomena. While Sammy was walking around the house, he began to feel something abnormal. It was getting denser and the air was getting colder. Upstairs, Sammy suddenly stood up and said, "Here, in this place, lies the power." Eimer entered with him into the room that Sammy had specified. The room was strangely dark, even though the windows were open. There was an old box in the corner, covered in dust. Sammy began to carefully examine it, and when he opened it, he found old papers and worn-out pictures inside. Sammy said, this box belonged to a person called Abdullah, who was famous for his ability to manipulate spirits. There seems to be an evil energy here, sticking to this place. Strange noises began to increase. The walls of the house were shaking as if something was hitting them from inside. The shadows were moving strangely, as if an invisible being was passing through the walls. Suddenly, a dark image appeared in front of Eimer, depicting the shape of a blurry person, whose features he could not distinguish. Eimer screamed as he tried to get away, but the shadow quickly approached, whispering unintelligible words. The sound was like whispers, but with every word, it grew more mysterious and dark. Sammy tried to use his tools to expel the evil energy. He started reciting ancient spells from a book he was holding. With each sentence, the shadows shook and seemed to retreat. But suddenly, the shadows stopped moving and began to merge with each other to form a larger entity. Two glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, looking directly at Sammy. The shadow said in a deep and terrifying voice, "You will not be able to escape from me. This place is mine." At that moment, all the lights in the house went out, and it became completely dark. Eimer and Sammy felt as if they were trapped inside the same entity. Sammy tried to continue the incantations, but his voice was gradually fading. Suddenly, Sammy disappeared as if the earth had swallowed him, leaving Eimer alone. Eimer tried to run towards the door, but he could not find it. The walls of the house seemed to move, and the entire features of the place changed. He became trapped in a maze of darkness, and heard the sounds of eerie laughter echoing around every corner. In one corner, he found a large mirror. The mirror reflected a completely different image, in which he saw himself bound in chains, with shadows surrounding him. As he approached the mirror, a black hand reached out from inside it and grabbed him. He tried to resist, but the hand was indescribably strong. Before the darkness pulled him in completely, he heard a whispered voice say, "You are a part of me now." Amer woke up in a completely dark place, and was facing the shadow again. But this time, he knew that everything in this place had changed forever. He had been trapped in this eternal darkness, and would never emerge from it. From a distance, the house looked quiet, but it whispered to everyone who approached, come closer to me." The end. The second story. The Whispering Shadows. It was a cold, moonless night when Emily arrived at the old house on the outskirts of town. The house had been abandoned for years, but she had been intrigued by its mystery ever since she was a child. Legends about the house spread through the town like wildfire, whispers of ghostly apparitions and eerie sounds that seemed to echo from within its decaying walls. Emily, however, was determined to find out the truth. Her car was the only one parked on the deserted road as she stepped out into the chilling air. The house loomed ahead, its windows dark like hollow eyes. The wind howled around her as if it were trying to warn her away. But Emily wasn't afraid. She had come for answers, and nothing would stop her. The front door creaked loudly as she pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and dust. The wooden floorboards groaned under her weight, and every step seemed to echo in the silence. As Emily ventured further into the house, she noticed strange symbols carved into the walls, symbols she didn't recognize. Her curiosity grew as she traced them with her fingers. She was about to turn a corner when she heard it, a faint whisper. It was so soft that she almost thought it was just the wind. But then, it came again, louder this time, as if someone was speaking right behind her. "Leave this place." The voice sent a chill down Emily's spine. She spun around, but the hallway was empty. Her heart raced, but she tried to shake off the feeling of unease. Maybe it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. Ignoring the warning, Emily continued deeper into the house, her flashlight illuminating the dark corners. The further she went, the stronger the sense of being watched became. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. She reached the basement door, and the cold air coming from the darkness below seemed to tug at her, urging her to descend. Despite the overwhelming dread clawing at her chest, Emily opened the door. The stairs creaked underfoot as she slowly made her way down, the flashlight trembling in her hand. At the bottom, the basement was even colder than the rest of the house. It was completely dark, save for the faint light from her flashlight. As she scanned the room, she noticed an old, dusty mirror hanging on the far wall. The glass was cracked, and there was something strange about the reflection. Emily stepped closer, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Suddenly, the reflection in the mirror shifted. It wasn't her own face staring back at her. It was a pale, twisted figure with hollow eyes and a wicked grin. Emily gasped and stumbled backward, but when she looked again, her own reflection had returned. Her breath quickened, and she turned to leave the basement. But as she did, the door slammed shut behind her with a deafening bang. She ran to the door and tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Panic surged within her as she hammered on the door, screaming for help. Then, the whispers returned, louder than before, surrounding her from all sides. "Yours now." The shadows in the room began to shift, twisting and writhing like living creatures. Emily backed away in terror, her body shaking uncontrollably. The shadows seemed to stretch toward her, their forms growing more solid with each passing second. In the distance, Emily could hear footsteps echoing through the house. But they were not her own. They were the footsteps of something far older, something far more sinister. With no other choice, she ran toward the far corner of the basement, hoping to find an escape. But as she turned, she saw them, figures emerging from the shadows. They were tall and thin, their faces obscured by dark hoods. Their eyes glowed an unnatural red as they stepped forward, their whispers filling the room. "Come with us," they hissed, their voices like 1,000 rustling leaves. Emily tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. The figures reached out, their cold fingers brushing against her skin, and she felt herself being pulled into the shadows. She struggled, but it was no use. The darkness swallowed her whole, and the whispers grew louder, merging into one unified voice. And then, there was silence. The next morning, the house stood as it always had, silent and empty. The townspeople had long since abandoned their stories of ghosts and hauntings, but there were still some who remembered Emily. Her car was found outside the house, but she was never seen again. To this day, the house remains standing, its windows watching, waiting. And if you listen closely enough, you might hear a faint whisper on the wind. Yours now. Let me know if you'd like another story or any changes to this one.